This is the Jim Nog Pod with your host, Jim Noguera. On today's show, episode 11, Daniel Yousef Tehrani, musician and singer. Let's start the show.
This is the Jim Nog Pod with Jim Noguera. It is the Jim Nog Pod with Jim Noguera.
Most interested man
It is the Jim Nog Pod with Jim Noguera.
The most interested man
Jim
in the
Nog
world.
Pod.
Interested,
It is the Jim
interested.
in the world.
Welcome. I have a special musical guest for episode 11. His name is Daniel Yousef Tehrani. Daniel is a musician and singer, and he teaches and tutors English and writing. He plays traditional Persian music as well as jazzy American stuff, what he terms English language music. We met up at a secret abode at BCC, part of the music department, his own little private practice space. He was kind enough to share that space with me. We talked about his culture, his formative years, and he sings and plays the setar for us, a traditional Persian stringed instrument, somewhere between a traditional Western guitar and a ukulele, if you ask me. I hope you enjoy. And now, Daniel Yousef Tehrani. All right, welcome to the podcast. I'm here joined by Daniel Tehrani. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me, James. It's a pleasure. I'm really grateful for you coming in and setting up all your stuff and being interested enough to talk to me about my esoteric artistic interests.
Yeah.
Specifically music. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're quite an interesting person. And I mean that with the most in the most complimentary way.
Thank you.
You do many things. How about introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely.
And talk about basically how would you describe like what you do and who you are.
Great. Well, I used to be like, let's say, doubtful about saying that I'm a singer or even just a musician. It was what I wanted to say deep down, but I think I felt like I wasn't good enough or sure enough to, use that moniker for myself or that label. But I do say that now. That's the first thing that I say when people ask me. I either say singer or musician, usually both, because that's what I consider myself. I mean, singers are a type of musician, but, I guess because I play instruments and, like, I'm into composing and stuff, I think of myself as a singer and a musician, or a singer and an instrumentalist and a songwriter and composer, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's like my passion, and this, doing this podcast is part of, I think, me just like saying yes to things more, whereas in the past I've gone up and down, but there have been long periods where I just was like, I can't do anything because I'm not good enough. Like I can't say yes to things. I can't try new things out, or take kind of like those kind of risks of like putting myself out there because I need to prepare more. I need to, study more in terms like learn more, practice more, and so on. So right now, like, you're asking me to introduce myself. Like, that's the main thing is like music and singing, and everything else is peripheral, really. Like in terms of at least professional activities. So like, I do also teach English and tutor at the Writing Center, as you know, and that is fine, and it's a nice thing that I have access to this space, and stuff like that, which is it's at the same campus. So I have this music room that I can practice in. We're also doing the podcast here, so that's great.
Yeah, this is really cool. I wish people could see the whole thing, but it's you have your own quiet little abode right here. It's cool that you get to come here. Pretty much whenever you want, right? You have the keys. And as a writer, I think I would like to have a space like this. I think this is like an artist, right? An artist just needs a space, a room of one's own, if you will. That's really cool. So you mentioned that there was a transition, right? Where you went from like, okay, I don't know whether I can call myself a singer, to now I can. And I kind of relate to that a little bit.
Really?
Because with the word author, like, I've published some stuff online, and I've self-published some books, and I feel slightly uncomfortable with using the term author, because it's like it comes with some baggage, with expectations or whatever connotations, that I may not feel that I fulfill or whatever. Because I haven't traditionally published a book through an agent and then through a publisher. So I tend to shy away from calling myself an author, but I do call myself a storyteller, a poet, a writer. So what was it for you? Why make the transition now to call yourself a singer?
Well, first of all, congrats on starting to make the transition yourself and calling yourself for what you are. The transition, I think, was a lot of things. Therapy, man, therapy. I feel like we need to just own it and just say, because people, it shouldn't be taboo. It shouldn't be I must be schizo because I went to therapy. And even if you're schizo, that's fine too. It's not your fault. Sure. But I'm luckily enough, I'm not schizophrenic or anything like that. But I don't have any serious mental illnesses as far as I know. But certainly it's been very helpful for me to go to therapy, and that's been helping me recently. I've also worked with life coaches, career coaches, just making the decision to really embrace like what I want to do. And sometimes I feel like, especially if you're an artist who feels like you're going against the grain, maybe oftentimes family's not always on board. It's not always the case, but I think it's a tough career path, or it's perceived to be a tough career path, and I think it probably is tougher than some other career paths. It's less of a sure thing. It's less of like kind of like you do this, you get good grades, and then you are set. Because it honestly, in the end, it doesn't actually matter what degree you have or what's on your resume. I always thought like the concept of an artist resume was always just like kind of like a funny thing, because it's like, yeah, but in the end, especially for like for any artist, it's really like, what is your art like? And it doesn't really matter what's on your resume. I kind of get it, but like at the same time, like I kind of don't, because to me, art, especially performance art, but I think performance art is so much about what your presence is like on a stage. And you could have had like all this training, but if you can't like get up on a stage and like just do the thing that you're supposed to do, it doesn't matter, how much preparation you have and formal training and all this stuff, once you're on the stage, it's all just you in that moment. So, the career path is of an artist, I think, is very uncertain most of the time. Even really top artists usually have had a lot of difficulties getting to where they are, and it's so for me it's like that transition has been so deeply emotional, psychological, and maybe even spiritual.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that's that's been the process for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said a lot of interesting things. I agree with you with what you're talking about in terms of therapy. I think it's just, I mean, people, right? I'm generalizing, but I think I can generalize a little bit. I think everybody goes through some really difficult stuff in life that therapy has this negative stigma attached to it, but it really I've done some therapy, but not like not like as a regular thing.
Uh-huh.
But if people can get over the negative stigma, I think, and realize that just like what we do at the writing center in terms of giving somebody else our perspective and stuff, I think that's what a therapist does really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that. And and then you were talking about how you made that transition, and it's and you were talking about being a writer. I'm sorry, being an artist, and how your future is sort of uncertain, and it's kind of like a brave thing to do, to really devote a lot of your time to it. So I definitely commend you, because you seem to have devoted yourself more to that. And talk about that. Like, is that difficult? And like, yeah, I mean, how difficult is that to like make that brave step to say, okay, this is a really uncertain thing,
Right.
but I'm going to devote myself to it? And yeah, there are people like, there are people who made it big. A lot of famous musicians that made it really big, kind of just from the get-go, right? But that's a rare thing.
Right.
So talk about how you made that choice and what that's like.
Well, like I said, therapy, and then I think most recently it's as a result of therapy and as a result of various conversations and journaling and thoughts as I go through my life. I've just decided that it's worth the risk, and I have to I think I have to do it in a manageable way. I have to so first of all, I do Persian music. This is not visible on this is what I play and I sing as well. This is setar. It's from Iran. I'm Iranian. These are, I guess, important background details.
So yeah, if you weren't, then it might be a little strange that you're playing the setar. But
no, I mean, I
cool.
think that Iranian music could and should become one of the known. I mean, all music has value, and there's no reason why people who aren't Iranian shouldn't play Iranian music. I mean, there are plenty of kids from Milwaukee going to India and learning yoga and Indian flute and sitar and tabla and stuff, and the Beatles did it. So why can't they go to why can't, and they're you have the Brooklyn Raga Massive where they're all playing Indian raga classical music down there. And half of them aren't even Indian. Actually, most of them are. So there's no reason, and people are playing rock and metal in Iran.
Yeah,
and blues,
that's pretty cool.
And all that stuff over there, and singing in English. So why can't the problem is that, I mean, this is getting you said free association, now we're kind of going to another thing, but I felt like it was good to give that background. I also do American English language music, but I mean, I think part of what I want to do actually eventually is Persian music. At least I haven't found the pedagogy to be very developed. I've had to really kind of cobble together my own way learning with a lot of help from certain teachers, but like I actually like study with like an American vocal coach here, and then I like kind of adapt the scales and exercises that he gives me to Persian music. But that's like how I like build up my voice, and I didn't get that in Iran. So I think there's a lot of ways in which Persian music is not right now. The state of the pedagogy of it can't really be. It's not conducive to like teaching somebody who's not Iranian. Although some people are doing that, but like I just feel like if we try to start teaching it to non-Iranians, we're gonna come up against like all these things that we're just like, well, just feel it, and they're gonna be like, I can't just feel it, I'm not Iranian. And then you have to come up with an actual pedagogy, and which I think is actually a really good thing, and I hope that I'll be able to contribute to that, because I think it's a really great tradition, and I hope to like spread it.
Cool. So. Yeah, I guess that's a big part of like who you are, your like your culture and
Right.
the music that you make. You talk about traditional Persian music, and you're gonna play some stuff for us.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yeah.
So before we get into that, can you describe sort of your formative years and what made you get into music?
Sure. And I'll try to get back and maybe give a little bit more of an answer about your previous question, which we got sidetracked from. But
Sure.
Maybe briefly I'll try to go back to that question, and then I'll go back to my formative years and all that. So, we're talking about artists and success and stuff, and I think my path is a good example. I do Persian classical music, and who knows if that's gonna work, and I don't even know where I'm gonna end up. So this whole idea of how do you become successful as an artist, I think it's really hard. It's a really, really difficult thing, and it's very complex, and there really is hard to say that there's any one set path. So with that said, my path to at least to here has been I think kind of a really odd, like really unexpected even for myself. Like I'm still really surprised that I'm like sitting here being like, yeah, I'm a singer, I'm a musician. I never thought that that's what it was going to be. Because I played drum when I was a little kid. I was always like tapping on stuff. When we were in Iran, I would just like tap on the like in preschool. I went to preschool and like part of kindergarten in Iran, and although I was born here actually, and my mother's American, we were in Iran for some years when I was young. So I would just tap on tables, and the teachers were like, this kid, maybe, I don't know if it was the teachers or my parents just noticed, and they got me a drum, or my uncle actually got me a drum. And I remember it was like this little thing, and I just like immediately took to it. I just loved it. I just like started playing all the time, like it was great. And then my parents were very, very encouraging, and they took me to various teachers. And I remember going to this one teacher. He had this like huge, beautiful house in like the northern suburbs of Tehran, like in the mountains, and it was just this beautiful. And we would walk into his house, and it was just like it had like almost like an atrium. And I could hear his like drumming coming from like the top floor. It was like these memories like are very deep in me. And my dad would play certain tracks or records, albums of classical Persian music in the car, and those things just like lodged really deep, really, really deep. And I don't think I realized how deep they were until maybe a little bit later in my life, like when I was a teenager. So like up until, up from the age of 5 when I got my first drum, or I think it might have been 5 or 6, to when I was 16 or so, I just kept playing drum, and I was like playing drum here in New York with a musician named Amir Vahab. And we would go around. I'd play the tombak, which is the little goblet drum, and I'd play the daf, which is a big frame drum. I don't have them here today, but that was like my thing. And then I think I started to then realize like just how deep this was in me. And I remember like my uncle brought back he sent back a CD of like Persian music, and I started listening to this. And then for the first time, I think it was at the age of 16 or so, that like I was listening to the voice actually, and to the melody more so than just the rhythm. And that was when I think things really took a turn toward like more serious engagement with the music, because I was just like, this is insane. Like I would just listen to these voices and these melodies, and it felt to me like something that was kind of like otherworldly actually, like and like almost like something that was coming from like another planet.
Sure.
Yeah, and that was really powerful. I was like, this music, there's like, oh, classical music, you think it's like boring, right? But like this classical music of Iran to me is not boring at all to me. It's like music from, Neptune, like that it like that has that kind of, and it's not, but it's still close to my heart, but it also has this sense of like being really 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 like
Just hopefully that won't come out on the mic, but okay.
being really 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 like like a sound coming from outside and you don't quite know what it is.
I know what you're talking about though, in terms of
Yeah.
or at least I think I know what you're talking about in terms of like music. And I feel like your music, which I've heard, I've seen you play, I've seen you perform, and it has like atmosphere, and it has like this sort of I don't know. I feel like sometimes we romanticize like ancient cultures and tradition and stuff like that, and so I don't want to do that. But I feel like, listening to traditional Persian music, which I've heard from you, and actually I haven't told you, but on Pandora, like I've searched traditional Persian music after listening to you play it, and I mean, you can just listen to it for hours, and it's so like pacifying, and it almost has like this kind of quality to it that it just puts you like in the zone.
Yeah.
So that's how I relate to what you're saying.
Right.
I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Sure. I mean, I think also it's so like when people go on Pandora, like Persian music, I think is so also very diverse, and classical music. So like I don't know what you listen to, but I do think that they all have a general quality of being generally kind of soulful and often peaceful, but some of the music is actually quite like almost like too. I remember one of my friends, and we did a concert in college, and I did a concert, and he, after listening, me and a couple other people, and he said, it's almost too beautiful. He said it's like it's like Persian music is just like almost too beautiful, and that's what it is.
Wow.
I think Persian music is too beautiful.
Too beautiful.
I think it's too beautiful. And the too beautiful part of it is the part that's a little bit not like peaceful. It's a little bit like insistent, actually. It's a little bit like, yeah.
Okay.
It's a little bit like,
Yeah.
like feel this feel the beauty of the world. Like you
Like-
don't like.
Okay.
And it's a little bit disturbing. It's a little bit disturbing that there is such beauty that actually might like make you go a little bit crazy or go into another state, because that's part it's informed by Sufi philosophy and spirituality, which is translated as mysticism or irfan, which they also call, which is like a Islamic mysticism. But it's not. But it's funny because irfan actually means knowledge, so it doesn't.
Okay.
It's not quite mysticism, but mysticism isn't. I don't know if it's the best translation, but anyway, this whirling dervishes, people have these associations with it, but it's the idea of oneness with the divine. It's like oneness with the divine, but oneness with the beloved, and the beloved can be, it's kind of like you don't name, to put a name on the beloved would be like, kind of like, facile. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, if I would be like, that's why I like listening to like some religious music where they're just like, oh, I love God and I love this, and it's just like, well, can be a little more subtle, like isn't God is so much more mysterious and huge than we can ever understand.
Yeah.
So, not to, everybody has a right to listen to music that moves them, but what I like about Sufi and Persian music is that it's a little bit more subtle, and it seems to me a little more humble, because it's like, well, do I really know what this God is that I'm singing to, that I could put a name on it and be so direct? Like, God is in everything, and if he also, Persian doesn't have a gender pronoun, so we don't know if it's man or woman. Where is he or she? Who is he or she? These are things that I think, people can't understand. So I like the Persian kind of mystical approach to that, to questions of the divine, at least in the art and the music. So.
Okay. I think that's a good transition for you to play one of your pieces, and
Sure.
so people can hear what we're talking about in case they haven't. So take it away.
Sure.
عشق تو آتش جانا، عشق تو آتش جانا، زد بر دل من، بر باد غم داد آخر، بر باد غم داد آخر، آب و گل من. روی تو چون دیده دل، روی تو چون دیده دل، بهتر ز ریلی شد بند زنجیر دام، شد بند زنجیر دام، مجنون دل من شد بند زنجیر دام، مجنون دل من. وصل تو مشکل مشکل، وصل تو مشکل مشکل، جان دادن آسان. وصل تو مشکل مشکل، وصل تو مشکل مشکل، جان دادن آسان. یا رب کن آسان آسان، یا رب کن آسان آسان، این مشکل من. یا رب کن آسان آسان، یا رب کن آسان آسان، این مشکل من. یا رب کن
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was very beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Um,
Too beautiful? I don't know if it's too beautiful because I had a late night last night, so.
Too beautiful in the sense that it's you might not be ready for it.
Yeah.
But was that an original piece?
No, it's not. If we have time for it, I'll play an original as well. That's an old. Persian music is like it's very old, and we can talk about that too and the history of it. But that is a Persian music. The melodies are old, and the basis of the modal system, and even probably the science and the physics of it behind how it's the tuning and.
Mm-hmm.
They say I think it uses Pythagorean tuning. So
wow. Okay.
So it's old stuff, but this song and composition of this song is like one of the old kind of traditional songs but it's not really old in the context of really Persian music. It's like old in the context of like music that everybody recognizes. It's one of the older songs that people recognize. It's probably about 100 years old, which for me is like not like when I think about it, it's like that's not that old, but for I guess like for in the context of the United States, like
for Americans,
if,
sure.
if it's from the
That's
70s,
ancient.
it's an oldie. This is like from the 1890s probably or something, 1900s, early 1900s.
Right.
Yeah.
But Persian culture is some of the oldest culture, right, in the world.
Yeah, sure. I was just talking about this. And this quality of being from another planet. I was reading about the ancient Egyptians actually, and I think when you read about some of these really old cultures, obviously, Egypt is even older than Iran. Iran, the current incarnation of Iranian culture, which is like Indo-Aryan or Aryan, not in the sense that the Nazis co-opted it, but like the Central Asian tribes. Iran actually comes from the word Aryan. Means land of the Aryans. But the current Iranians, basically came into Iran I think they say like around 1000 BC. So
okay. And
and then this music probably started some 100 years after that when the Achaemenid dynasty started. But honestly, I have to do more research about that. A lot of this stuff could be a lot of like legends and myth and not really, but I think that it definitely there was a beginning of the legend goes that these two court musicians were asked to compose a melody for every day of the year, and they composed 365 melodies, and there are and that some of them have gotten lost over time, but there are about 330, 340 melodies now that you're basically supposed to memorize if you want to become a classical Persian musician, and they're divided into 7 modes, and then there are more subdivisions within the modes, and so that modal system, based on what I know, is probably very ancient, so before BC kind of stuff. But this quality of when you go back far enough, it gets a little bit like you're coming from another planet. It's like, I was reading about the Egyptians, like in the pyramids and even ancient Iran. You're like, how did they build this stuff? Persepolis, for example, these huge structures built in like 400 BC or 500 BC. Like, how'd you do that? Like, that's crazy. And it's just so long ago, at least in human terms, that it becomes a little bit of like just like it's coming from another dimension, a little bit like science fiction almost. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I think people forget that ancient people were just as intelligent as people today. It's just obviously there were technological differences.
Right.
And it's so interesting that a lot of the stuff that they did still baffles us today. So many examples of that, right?
Right.
The pyramids, you mentioned the Persepolis, right?
Yeah.
The Maori,
New Zealand?
Actually, no. That's not what I meant to say. I meant to say the the Eastern Island heads. I forget what they're called.
I don't remember, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the giant heads. Like
Yeah.
there's Stonehenge.
Right, Stonehenge, absolutely. Ancient China and India, we shouldn't fail to mention those. I mean, many of these ancient cultures,
Right.
did things, diverted rivers, and built huge monuments, and had a philosophy. I mean, you look at ancient Indian philosophy. I mean, they were talking about stuff that people are talking about today, like what is objective truth? Is there such a thing? Can you describe it in language? And they had these debates, and all this terminology. Very advanced actually, if you think about it. But like, 2,000 years before Christ.
Yeah. It's a shame that when you think about all of the progress that we've made in ancient times, a lot of it has been, a lot of the progress has been retarded because of war, and the one of the famous examples of loss of knowledge is the burning of the Library of Alexandria.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So I think I heard something like, I don't know, this sounds apocryphal, right? This is one of those ancient sort of stories, but like I've heard some people say that, for instance, the knowledge that was lost, if it hadn't been lost, we would be like 1,000 years like ahead of where we are. I don't know if that's true, but
wow, yeah.
But it that sort of stuff is disappointing. And anyway, the way that I want to relate this back to music is that I feel like music, especially ancient music, ancient culture,
right,
might be so, for lack of a better term, pure, that it touches a lot of our like evolutionary, like just our biology, I think. And maybe it's just more in touch with that.
Might be.
Maybe, I don't know. And maybe that's why this sort of music like resonates. I don't know. What do you think?
I think about this stuff a lot, and I hope that in another year or two we can talk about it and I'll know more. But I'm really getting into the tunings and understanding, because I'm, I want to make sure that I sing in tune, obviously, but also that I'm tuning my instrument right. Because it's funny because I studied Persian. I've studied like voice with an American vocal coach, and actually the tuning of, like, let's say piano is slightly different, or in some ways very different from a Persian instrument. But just the notes actually themselves are not exactly the same, because Persian Western music uses what's called equal temperament, which means, and this is what I'm getting into, and I don't know a lot about it, but it's the way that you calculate the frequencies of each note is different. It's supposed to be, they divide it evenly in a way so that everything's kind of symmetrical, and you can play any piece anywhere on the instrument, and you can change keys easily. It's very like evenly broken down. But actually, one of the things that I've heard makes a piano very hard to tune is that actually it's out of tune with itself slightly. You have to, the further you go out, the more you have to actually adjust so that everything ends up evenly distributed. But the way that the physics work and the way that the human ear works means that the pure tuning, which is called just temperament or juste temperament, I don't know if they pronounce it the French way or the American way, English way, but this setar is actually tuned more to just temperament, which is not equal temperament. So that, like, I actually have to move these frets around every once in a while, and it's closer to the pure tuning, but it gives it certain limitations, because that means you can't play as many complex harmonies on it. It'd be hard to, like, Bach is the one who did this equal temperament thing, I think. See. So, but that led to this huge, that made it much easier to write really complex, like, harmonies and multiple melodic lines, and that's what, for those of who might be listening who don't know what I'm talking about, basically when you listen to, like Mozart or Beethoven or Tchaikovsky, and you hear all these complex layers of, like, melodies and harmonies and all these, just basically all these instruments playing, it gives it this three-dimensionality that this music lacks.
I see.
But you also lose something with that, which I think is this purity of each note. Just playing one note on this instrument can be, like, so pure and calming.
Yeah. Because
the intervals are very pure. They're based apparently on a Pythagorean kind of ancient principle of
Wow.
that is very, very close to like what the human ear perceives as most perfectly in tune. So that's
I'm
my
trying to
that's my
follow
understanding.
what you're saying. Yeah. I think I vaguely understand what you're saying.
Basically, we human beings, we have a certain, I guess, certain like an instinct for notes,
Yeah.
and certain things sound more in tune to us, and we may not even realize it, or may give us. It may actually, like, music affects us physiologically, as you
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
what you
okay.
said, and depending on the space between the notes, that can change. So I mean, the most obvious example would be like the difference between this, like and this. One of them sounds more minor. One of them sounds major. So that's just because I moved one of the notes up
Okay.
and made the. But the point is that that's a pretty large and obvious difference. But even slight differences in the space between notes also have an effect, even if people aren't consciously aware of it.
Yeah.
So that's the point, that these very subtle differences in tuning, I think, do also have psychological, emotional effects on how people, maybe they hear this music as more meditative, more pacifying, as you were saying, contemplative, and another type of music that has a very slight difference in the tuning may actually have a different emotional effect, even though you may not realize exactly why that is. So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that kind of relates to some of what we were talking about in terms of, or some of the stuff that I was saying. I hope it makes sense. This like biological, like an instinctual, I don't know, gravitation towards music.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the golden ratio and like?
Yes.
Like, forgive my ignorance on this. Is that based on like the Pythagorean theorem?
It might be. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
My mom is into that because she's putting windows on our house upstate.
Okay,
she's
that's
always
cool.
talking about the golden, and she says ratio instead of like ratio, and I'm always like, Mom, why are you saying ratio? But she loves that. I don't know. Maybe it sounds more academic. I don't know. But yeah, that kind of stuff is interesting. Like stuff that is just inherently more aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
It's a funny thing, and it goes back to math. So Pythagoras like came up with a formula for like tuning instruments to make it in very almost like biologically aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So there might be some.
There might be some relationship to the golden ratio, which is like how much, right? Like how, like height versus width. Let's say if you want to put a window, like there's a certain ratio between like the height of the window and the width of the window that's most pleasing to the eye. Isn't that what the golden ratio is? Stuff related to that.
Yeah,
right?
it has. I forget the exact. No, I think it's like 1.6 to 1, something like that. Like a ratio of like a little more than 1.5 to 1. Like you see this ratio like all over the human body.
Right.
Like I forget the specific examples, but like distances between, certain features on your face, the length of your fingers.
Amazing.
And yeah, and people whose faces like match this ratio are deemed to be the most attractive, for example.
Interesting.
I think I heard something like Brad Pitt has like a very high score on the golden ratio thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, this does seem to be something like hardwired in our
Right. I think there
biology.
are certain things like that, and I think that stuff is really interesting, and I'm interested in on the first place, just on practical level, making sure that I'm singing and playing like, really the way that I'm supposed to, and that's another thing that it's been hard for me to figure out, and I wonder. I mean, I'm planning to go back to Iran. I really want to see, like what, how are the Persian instruments supposed to be tuned, and how that different is that from, Western music, and what effect does that have on somebody psychologically? But in the first place, I just really want to make sure that I'm playing, in tune, and then I'm putting the frets because you can move these frets. I want to have it in the right place. But it does bring up this kind of interesting thing where it's like people may be doing this by instinct. Let's say in Iran, nobody ever told me, oh, you tune to this frequency, that frequency, but behind it there may be some actual like mathematical formulas, and that would be really interesting.
And it's all just kind of like stuck in our heads.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about math. Like, is math really something that this is a little bit of a esoteric debate that I heard recently, and
it's interesting
whether math is objective in the universe, or whether it kind of comes out of us, and it's how we understand the universe.
That's a very good question. I don't know.
And I don't know.
But it seems like a good place. One good place to explore that question would be in the arts, right? Like visual arts. You're talking about golden ratio. I just said ratio like my mom. Like the golden ratio, or in music. I'm talking visual art, or in music where there's probably math behind it. Perhaps even in literature and poetry certainly.
Sure.
Because there's a music to it. But I wonder even in other genres of literature if there's some kind of I don't know.
It's probably everywhere.
Yeah.
Probably. Have you heard of somebody called I may not, I looked him up the other day, so I might not have the pronunciation correct. I think his name is Estas Tone, and he's a Ukrainian modern day troubadour, and he kind of reminds me of you. He has like long hair and a beard, and he kind of looks like a wandering Viking sort of. But he plays the guitar really well, and he plays like instrumental pieces.
Right.
Do you, what do you see yourself doing? Do you see yourself, do you gravitate more towards just instrumental pieces, or do you see yourself, I don't know. Let me figure out how I want to ask this. Is there a difference to you in terms of playing just purely instrumental pieces and playing more, attaching lyrics to music? Do you feel like that changes the music, and which do you prefer?
I don't know. I like both. I am more motivated to do the lyrics and the singing side myself. I would be actually pretty content to have somebody else do most of the instrumental stuff, especially when it comes to like really perfecting the techniques and the sounds and the I guess the technical aspects of it. I just kind of play the instrument because I like being able to understand what I'm doing with my voice, making sure that I'm in tune, which is always, which is like my new thing, because for the past few years I've been very focused on like making sure that I like kind of working on like range and breath control, range and technical aspects of like kind of the just like voice production, and not so much on the musicality of it. And now I'm like really interested in that, and I find that because now that I feel like my vocal technique is not in a bad place, in a pretty good place, like I'm really interested in like because there are these ornaments in Persian music, like, oh, and these are actually almost like a yodel. You're going into like a different part of your voice, and those actually are going to a note. So it's like, oh, and nobody ever taught me that. I just kind of figured it out, and then have had it confirmed in various ways. But now I'm really interested in I love having an instrument so that I can be like visualize what I'm doing with my voice. So that's one of the main reasons that I love having an instrument. Plus, I start all my songwriting with instruments. So like even if I have a poem, I'll play whatever that poem, and I hope we can leave time for me to play one of my own compositions. I just look at a poem or think of a theme or whatever, and I just play something, and then it starts with the instrument, and then I put lyrics and melody and the voice over that. So it has to start with the instrument. It doesn't work very well for me to just like sing and then come up with chords or whatever to match my singing. That doesn't work for me. It's almost like I need to start the instrument is like the earth, or and I need to like start from there, and then I can put the voice over it. So to me, what I do is I write lyrics and melodic lines over instrumental tracks. But I really appreciate like instrumental music without vocals too. It's just not something that I'm inspired to like really specialize in. I'm inspired mainly to like practice singing twice a day and perfect my voice as much as I can. Obviously that's a ongoing journey, but grounding myself and rooting myself in the instruments, which I think is really important for me at least, and for my creative process. And so
Okay. All right. So I would love to hear another piece of yours.
Sure. And I should say that actually there's a poem here that is by Mojtaba Kashani, who's a Persian poet from I think he wrote these poems before the revolution in 1979, I think. I'm not 100% certain. But he's a modern poet. And he wrote this poem, and I've always been very inspired by it. And I actually, one of the things that I really want to do is I like writing poetry too, and I would like to write poetry in Persian. I've written some, and I also like to translate the poems into English so that people can kind of hear what I'm talking about and know what I'm talking about. And this poem, I actually tried to translate it into the same rhyme scheme, actually, as the original.
Was that difficult?
Not as difficult as you'd think, but I think that's because I'm an English teacher, and I love poetry, and I have written a lot of poetry in English. Although that was one of the reasons I was asking you a couple months ago, if you remember, like, if you had any recommendations for learning more about like the metrics and prosody of English poetry, which I'm still like interested in doing. Like, that kind of goes back to your question about vocal versus instrumental. Like, I'm most interested in going deep technically into the voice technique, and also like words and poetry and lyrics. That's like where like my specialty is. And the really, like, if some people are really into the depth of like, how do I strike the strings just right to get the right sound? That's not really like where I'm gonna go really deep. I'm gonna go really deep in the words and the voice. So I'm gonna read this poem, and I'll read just like a few lines of the Persian so you get a sense of what the rhyme scheme is like, and then I'll sing it. Then I'll read the translation, then I'll sing it. So it goes. The Persian is like this. In jahan آیینه کردار ماست خوب یا بد هرچه هست آثار ماست. So if you notice there, the rhyme is آرماست. The next one is acht. So it's couplets. اهل عشق اهل علم اهل تخت کار ما کردند هم آسان و سخت. اهل علم آمد به دانایی فزود اهل عشق آیین زیبایی گشود. So this is how it goes in rhyming couplets. And I believe that this form is called masnavi in Persian. So my English translation is, this world is but a mirror of our deeds. Good or ill, 'tis we who plant the seeds. Thinkers, lovers, seekers of the throne. Have made our ease or hardship each alone. Thinkers, bringing knowledge as their duty. Lovers, open pathways unto beauty. Seekers of the throne then come to power. The people suffer more with every hour. With words, they speak of freeing us from chains, while behind the scenes injustice reigns. Seekers of the throne, intend to lie, consigning all development to die. While rulers shackle thinking with their powers, lovers live to fill the world with flowers. The rulers lose their own selves finally, but lovers tithe themselves to you and me. Can we talk about that poem just for a second before I?
Yeah,
before
yeah.
I,
I first off, it's beautiful, and maybe it's too beautiful, but yeah, you do a really good job at keeping a lot of the same like meter throughout, and
It's a work. I still need to work. It's a work in progress, as you can see by the. I need to
if you want to show that to the camera, you can. It does look a little like chicken scratch, but
well, because I'm constantly crossing out words, and so it's
right,
definitely
man.
will probably, this is not the final version, but I thought
Yeah.
Anyway, so what did you want to say?
So, it reads very faithfully. I do think a lot of the meter is the same, and the rhyme I think also matches. So I think you did a good job with that, and I think also your word choices is good. It's not too it's not like too out there. Like it feels like it, especially some of the words you use, like those who seek the throne and flowers, lovers. It feels like it could, just come from. It doesn't feel like necessarily like a modern lexicon.
Ah, interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going from basically, this poem that he wrote, although he was a modern poet, this particular poem is more in a classical style.
Okay.
And it's very similar to what you might read from like a classical poet of Iran, like Rumi or Hafez or Sadi, kind of a humanistic poem. And actually, there's one by Sadi in front of the United Nations here in New York. I don't know how the translation goes, but it's about humanity being all kind of connected to each other, and if one part of like a body, and if one part of the body is in pain or is suffering, none of the other parts can be okay. And if you don't see that, if you're indifferent to the suffering of other people, then you cannot be called a human.
Wow.
So this I think is in that very great tradition of humanistic Iranian poetry, which I'm all about. I love that stuff. So so I took this poem and I composed a poem. I composed a melody and instrumental, and this, unlike the other, the previous piece that I played and sang, it's not rhythmic in a way that you could like clap your hands to. It follows more like the meter of the poem. So I would say that it follows poetic meter. Some people call it free rhythm. I don't really think it's free totally, because you can't just do anything. It has to follow the meter. But
I see.
so اینجا آینه آثار ماست ای دوست. خوب یا بد هرچه هست آثار ماست ای دوست. اهل عشق اهل علم اهل تخت کار ما کردند هم آسان و سخت. اهل علم آمد به دانایی فزود، اهل عشق آیین زیبایی گشود، اهل تخت آمد که نادانی کند، هرچه آبادیست ویرانی کند. حاکمان اندیشه در قول کرده اند، عاشقان دنیا پر از گل کرده اند. حاکمان خدا عاقبت گم کرده اند عزیز من. عاشقان خود وقف مردم کرده اند. عاشقان خود به مردم کرده اند ای دوست. Thank you very much.
Nicely done.
Thank you. So that's what I'm really inspired by, is these kind of poems. And yeah.
Is there a particular theme that you're drawn towards, like particular messages maybe?
I would call this social justice. I'm also interested in environmental justice, especially environmental justice, I would say, and like anything that is connecting us to the natural world, connecting people, connecting me to the natural world, and including any issues that I would, say fall in the arena of environmental justice, which is linked to social justice.
Mm-hmm.
Important issues like that. So yeah, I mean, that's what I hope to really focus on in my music. Yeah.
Would you say that that traditional Persian music is, at least some of the lyrical content is focused on those themes, or do those stand out in Persian music, or?
Some. There's a. Let me see if I can. One of the most inspirational, and this is very, very short. I'll just try to play it like a short version of. It says, "I'm so green today. I'm so green today, and my whole body is awake." Or my whole body is hoshiar, which means awake and aware and connected. So this is a modern poet who actually went to Japan. His name is Yousef Tehrani, and he really got into Zen Buddhism, and I think probably even had some experience with Shinto. And he came back, and he wrote a poem. He even wrote a poem that I would love to actually sing, put into song, about how he said, my prayer mat is a carpet of flowers, and I pray in the direction of this flower. That's kind of taking Islam and putting it into this very nature, earth-based kind of aesthetic, I guess. So this poem is just, I don't even know if I'm tuned right to really play this here, but من چه سبزم امروز من چه سبزم امروز من چه سبزم امروز و چه اندازه تنم هوشیار است و چه اندازه تنم هوشیار است. That's, to me, one of the most beautiful melodies and beautiful lyrics that have ever been composed, at least in Persian music, which for me is just one of my preferred genre. So just I am so green today. I am so green today. I am so green today, and my whole body is awake.
I love that.
That's it. Yeah.
That's like, you just.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of this music, you kind of just feel it, like even if you don't understand the lyrics, like you get an appreciation for the world, or you become more sort of at peace with the stuff around you. And I really I really gravitate towards that kind of music because, like I said earlier, I feel like the 21st century can be very stressful oftentimes. Yeah. And music is just a way that art is a way in which humans maybe grasp at something that's maybe higher, or something within themselves, something spiritual, some aspiration. And so I think it's a beautiful thing, and it's part of why I do art.
Yeah, man.
So you said you do other genres. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I don't have my guitar here, which is usually what I'll play, but I'm into doing some kind of jazzy neo soul kind of thing, and it's just different. It's English. I call it English language music because that's what it's about. I guess I'm very language oriented. So I think of this as Persian language music, and that's English language music, and that's the music that comes out of me in English, and this is the music that comes out of me in Persian. And I'm interested in doing that stuff too. I mean, and I like that if I write in English and I perform, people can understand me. Obviously, if I'm in this country, I don't have to translate the poem. But the music itself is a little bit less powerful for me. The notes, the melodies, this is very ancient sounding, and I feel like that gives it power, a subtle power, but if you're listening, it is powerful. And the English language music is not ancient. has another kind of power, but it's not. For me, it's not as powerful. It's not, and, but it's like more hip, I guess, to today. So and it is part of me. You know, I grew up in New York City, partially, mostly. So I heard, you know, R&B. I heard a lot of different kinds of music, but the music that tends to come out when I sing in English, when I'm composing, thinking about kind of an American or English sound, neo soul, R&B. I don't know. That's just what comes out.
Great.
So yeah.
So do you do shows performing that style as well?
Yeah, I would love to, and I have done a few, and I'd love to keep doing more. I've done mostly Persian music, performance wise, but I'm trying to kind of activate both and have both going, which is funny because I almost feel like I've been thinking about getting I'm kind of like divided in a funny way because they're two different ones, and like I've been thinking about like, oh, like should my Facebook artist page, which is Yousef, Yousef, should I like have it both? Should I have both my like styles on there, or should I like have a different one for each style? I think they should just be both. But then like if I were to ever get a manager or an agent, which I'm thinking about, it'd be like, you know, one would be like kind of somebody who probably specializes in like world music, and one would be like a, you know, somebody who could help somebody who's trying to play in maybe like a bar or at some festival or somewhere that's like soul or neo soul. So it's like they're two different genres, and I think it's funny like that. Maybe I'll bring them together somehow, but it's funny that I can't like give up either one of them. Like, but Persian music never. But like sometimes I'm like, oh, I should just do Persian music, and then like part of me just feels like unsatisfied. Like there's a part of me that wants to speak that is like the part of me that grew up on like you know in Inwood, you know, near Dyckman Street, and like right here uptown Manhattan, you know, basically like Washington Heights, Inwood. Like that part of me needs to like be able to express itself too, you know, and with an American mother who speaks English and who spoke English, and all my friends who speak English, and you know, like it's like they're the part of me that needs to express that, you know.
Exactly, and why limit yourself? I feel like I mean today's world is like moving in that direction where we're seeing like a blending of many different genres, and and like we were talking about, I mean this sort of stuff, music in general, but certainly some of the older musical styles resonate with people on a like maybe a biological level, and so I think it speaks through the ages. So I definitely encourage you to do both.
Thank you. I like hearing that.
Of course, man. And you know, I've never heard traditional Persian music before, but when I did, you know, I really gravitated towards it, and I think, you know, if you want some, for example, I like to have right music. You know, music that's like maybe instrumental or just maybe repetitive that I can write to.
Yeah.
I think Persian music certainly falls into that category.
Sweet.
If you want to relax, if you're doing some yoga, anything like that, if you're relaxing in the park, I think this is perfect music to listen to.
May I also make a suggestion for another thing? If you're looking to, I would say, have some emotional release, I think Persian music is also a great emotional release. But it's an emotional release in a way that maybe some people aren't so used to. So maybe it's a good thing to try, because maybe people are used to emotional release with something that's like strong and loud. But I think that there's a certain intensity. There's a quiet intensity to Persian music that could allow a kind of like almost like
a catharsis.
I find that if I really need to, maybe let's say cry, but not necessarily in like a despairing way, but in like just like a release, just like to release,
Yeah.
not then to go into depression or feel like I need to keep crying all day, but like I'll listen to Persian. I'll listen. There's certain tracks in Persian music that help me to do that, to help me have that release. Or if I'm not, and it doesn't have to be always a crying release. It could be just like a time where I just want to feel really like present. I want to feel really like right where I am, and I want to feel, just kind of like integrated and connected to whatever's right there with me and whatever emotions I'm feeling. And I want that kind of like deep, subtle connection. Let's just say deep connection. And I think Persian music is great for that. So it could be something where, if you're out in the park and you want to look at the trees and listen to Persian music, to me, Persian music is all the instruments are wood. None of them are using artificial materials.
True.
They're just wood and metal, basically.
Yeah, very connected.
And these frets are with, I don't know, some natural fiber.
Yeah.
And everything else is just wood. So it's very connected to the earth, and I always feel like the contours of the melodies are like the contours of the earth, and it's very close to it. And so, in addition to the kind of like, if you're doing yoga, if you're writing, I think that's great. And then there's another, if you're walking in the park, or if you just want to have a quiet moment sitting on your couch, and you don't want to just turn on the TV, you want to maybe have a little emotional release or contemplation or feeling of peace. I think Persian music is excellent for that. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really awesome. Definitely suggest people to listen to it. Would you suggest any like just famous
Sure.
artists?
Well, these will be hard to spell, but maybe I'll spell the last names, and then if you want to, like, I don't know if there's a way that you can put this in the podcast or on the visual, but the ones that I would recommend would be, so I'll recommend Shajarian, Shajarian. He's probably the most prominent famous vocalist, most accomplished. Another very prominent vocalist is Nazeri. That's just his last name, but if you write in Nazeri, there's pretty much there'll be just him. That's Nazeri, and then I would say for instrumentalists, Lotfi, Lotfi, and Meshkatian, Meshkatian, and Meshkatian plays santur, which is hammered dulcimer. Beautiful instrument, and he's also a composer. And Lotfi, actually, I studied with him. I studied drum with him. He played everything. He was virtuoso. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago. He plays the tar, which is similar to setar, but it's a little bigger and has a little bit of a different sound. They are two great instrumentalists. So if you just YouTube those or go on Pandora or whatever, even on Amazon, they have albums and iTunes, and I'm sure they have stuff on all these different sites. So yeah.
Very cool. So finally, before we wrap up, just want to say if you want to end with some sort of like maybe a message that you want to get across.
Well, I think that the message is in the music. I think I read the poem for you. That's my message. And I translated the other poem about being green, and I traded not being green in like the be green like in the consumer culture way, but like actually I have a poem that I'll end with a poem that I actually wrote that I think is actually very much related to this whole aesthetic, especially the earth and the environmental kind of side of it. So it is an English poem, but inspired, I think, by kind of my artistic center, I would say, which incorporates a lot of elements, but very prominently Persian music, Persian poetry, art. Someday, put your hand on the grass. Someday, put your hand on the grass. Someday, Let that old brass fall from your purse and settle in the earth. Let the earth stain your shirt and bring with you all your stories and songs. Let the birds alight. Let in all that belongs. That's my message.
That's beautiful. I'll listen to that again to
Thank you.
pick up on more of the subtlety of that. Next time on the Gymnog Pod, Seco 1844, graphic artist who did the logo for the pod. But that is not all. He will bring a special musical guest along with him, and as of yet, unnamed rapper. There will be live rapping as well as snippets of songs and art. And before I go, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Daniel Yousef Tehrani's Facebook page, which he just launched. Search at Yousef Song, one word, to find it. And Yousef is spelled Yousef. Music for Gymnog Pod by Marcos and La Guagua, marcosanlaguagua.com. Guagua is spelled Guagua. Art by Seco 1844 at Seco 1844 on Instagram. Seco is Seko. My website, which contains news and updates, bios, social media links, contact info, a bibliography, a blog, and a podcast page, is jamesnoguera.com. Noguera is Noguera. Please show your support by subscribing and interacting with the pod on iTunes or wherever you happen to find it, and on YouTube. You can donate on patreon.com/gymnog or directly via paypal.me/gymnog. And thank you for your interest.